is Gwen Etter, and she's going to be talking about capturing a moment of historic content, oral history as a catalyst for social change. And somewhere here, I do believe I have something to say about you, but I have to find it. Here it is. So, Gwen has a PhD in linguistics from the University of Michigan. She's a professor emerita at Miami University of Ohio, where she taught linguistics, Black World Studies, and women's gender and sexuality studies. She's the author of My Soul is My Own, Narratives of African American Women in the Professions, and co-authored with Richard Thomas, Lights of the Spirit, Historical Portraits of Black Baha'is in North Carolina, 1898 to 2000, and co-editor with Michelle Foster, Unrelated Kin, Race and Gender in Women's Personal Narratives. Recently, she wrote the biography for young people, Attorney for Racial Justice, the story of Elsie Austin. It's one of my favorites. I love it. So welcome, Gwen Etter.
So I first want to thank you for coming back after lunch. I'm so glad too, after a delicious lunch, I'm so glad to see you. And I will say it's an honor to share this panel with my friend Angelita. We haven't seen each other in years. And it turns out that in one of our past conversations, I did a Fulbright in Zambia and she did a Fulbright, and we had the same officer from the federal government, and we had the same problems with the same officer. So we have a lot to talk about. But anyway, the topic of my presentation, the title is Capturing a Moment of Historic Portent, Oral History as a Catalyst for Change. This presentation is based on a research study that I conducted on Bahá'ís and social justice in communities where racial violence was highly publicized. This represents another way to touch history and to understand the different ways that we can play our part in advancing the unity of mankind. First, I will highlight the structure of the project before I discuss the findings. And I will begin with this quote, which frames this research project. A moment of historic portent has arrived for your nation as the conscience of its citizenry has stirred, creating possibilities for marked social change. It holds significance not only for the destiny of America anticipated in the sacred writings, but also for the mission entrusted to your community by the hand of Abdul Baha, who cherished you dearly and called you to a path of sacrifice and high endeavor. Before I talk about my project, I want to call your attention to this publication, The Baha'i Faith and African American Studies, Perspectives on Racial Justice. It was edited by Lonnie Ransom and Leili Mapanya, published in 2023. And as you can see from the table of contents, some of our well-known scholars offered essays for this publication. The Spread of the Baha'i Faith Among African Americans, 1898 to 1925, by Richard Hollinger, who was our speaker last year, one of our speakers here. Reconsidering the Civil Rights Era, by June Manning Thomas. Baha'i Teachings on Racial Unity, Influences on My Academic Career, by Richard Thomas. 4, the Ruhi Training Institute Program, One Method for Creating Racial Harmony. 5, Baha'i Efforts to Transform Society, Using Fact Data to Measure Race Unity Activity. And finally, my essay that I'm going to talk about today, Anti-Black Racism, a Baha'i Response. And I also must warn you that I often interrupt myself to tell a story, but I'm really going to try not to do that. I want to talk in general about this kind of research, which is very different from the kind of research that we normally talk about at these conferences. And by so doing, tell you about the structure of my project. Oral history is a kind of empirical research. And empirical research is the process of gaining knowledge through direct observation, measurement, and experience, rather than through theory or speculation. And there are many benefits of empirical research. Empirical research keeps scholarship accountable to the real world. It helps us understand how people behave, how communities remember, how institutes function, and how historical experiences are lived and reported. There are three major aspects of empirical research: systematic observation or data collection, a clear research question or hypothesis, and analysis of the data. And from here, we can break down empirical research into two broad categories. One is quantitative research that gathers and analyzes numerical data. And the other is qualitative research that is used to explore and understand non-numerical data, such as language and behavior. Oral history, then, is a specialized kind of empirical research. For me, empirical research, the idea of empirical research, connects very closely to the Bahá'í principle of individual investigation of truth. God has given man the eye of investigation by which he may see and recognize the truth. He has endowed man with ears that he may hear the message of reality, and conferred upon him the gift of reason by which he may discover things for himself. This is his endowment and equipment for the investigation of reality. Man is not intended to see through the eyes of another, hear through another's ears, nor comprehend with another's brain. And I won't read this entire quote, but I just wanted to share with you my connection, how I'm connecting empirical research to the idea of the individual investigation of truth. Now, I won't talk too much about this slide because Angelita did a great job of defining what we know as oral history. And the technology, of course, has changed over the years and is continuing to change. This is an oral history interview conducted in 1916 by anthropologist Frances Dinsmore. She was interested in preserving Native American music and culture. Here she's interviewing a man by the name of Mountain Chief. And this phonograph was the phonograph recording. And she did this for the Bureau of American Ethnology. So this is one of my favorite illustrations of oral history back in the day. So let me talk a little bit about my research design, and again, share with you another quote from that 2020 letter from the Universal House of Justice that frames the overall perspective of my research and this particular project. We ardently pray that the American people will grasp the possibilities of this moment to create a consequential reform of the social order that will free it from the pernicious effects of racial prejudice and will hasten the attainment of a just, diverse, and united society that can increasingly manifest the oneness of the human family. So remember, I was saying that having a research question is one of the requirements of empirical research. So I had two research questions. One is, How have Baha'is responded to the recent murders of unarmed African Americans in their respective communities? And the second question, how do Baha'is understand and experience racism and discrimination in their own lives? I focused on 3 Baha'i communities. I focused on Ferguson, Missouri, where in 2014, 18-year-old Michael Brown was murdered. I interviewed Baha'is in Louisville, Kentucky, where in 2020, 26-year-old Breonna Taylor was murdered. And I interviewed Baha'is in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where in 2020, 47-year-old George Floyd was killed. My questions are as follows. I had 32 questions. I have approximately 25 participants, but I'm only reporting the findings from 16 of these 25 participants. This question, have you personally experienced discrimination, is a baseline question. And that type of question is a starting point. It reveals initial conditions, knowledge, and attitude. And here are some of the other questions that I asked, not in any particular order. What was the neighborhood, city, or community like before the murder of fill in the blank with one of these names? Number 2, what is the neighborhood, city environment like now, about a year later? Number 3, what is your personal definition of justice? And number 4, how does your religion shape your views of unity, justice, of diversity? So here are some of the demographics of the participants who responded to my study. I had 16 participants from this part of the study, 5 from Missouri, 5 from Kentucky, 6 from Minnesota. The age range was 91 to 40 years old. There were 10 males and 6 females. The ethnicity of this sample size, 8 African Americans, 4 white Americans, 4 with Iranian or Puerto Rican ancestry. So I'd like to talk very briefly about some of the findings from the baseline question, and that is, have you experienced discrimination personally? Here's some of the answers. Oh my God, ask me if I breathed every day. Yes, constantly. It happens all the time. It was part and parcel of the landscape. I was constantly reminded that I am a foreigner. Oh yes, I am an American. I've been pulled over more times than I can count. And I just want to take a moment to share with you this incident that this particular person described. She said that she was traveling from one state to another, an adjacent state, about a 4-hour trip. She traveled there to visit relatives. And on her way back home from one state to the other, she was pulled over by the border patrol and questioned and asked if he could search her car. And she said, sure. And he searched her car and he said, I find it very strange that you're traveling and you don't have any luggage. And she said, I just went for a day to see my relatives and I'm on my way back home. And he said to her, well, we have to verify that. Get your relatives on the phone. And so she had to go through all of this to prove to him that she was doing what she said she was doing. So this was her answer to this baseline question about experiencing discrimination. And this last one, where, oh, you can't see it, I can see it. Okay, so this last one She said, on my way home from an Ayami House celebration, I decided to walk home. I lived in the same neighborhood. It was only about 4 blocks away. So I walked home. And on my way home, I was kidnapped and beaten. And she survived this particular incident. But my point is that these respondents expressed a constant experience with discrimination. And these are not events that happened way in the past. These are recent events. And I mention this to you, and I know this is difficult to hear sometimes, but we must not remain silent. Discrimination they experienced was based on race, gender, and country of origin. Now, of the findings, and this is where I became hopeful when I found out what they did, how they responded. And so these are some of the things that they talked about. One person talked about working with like-minded people, looking at his or her community and joining with others to work on the issues in that particular community. Others joined peaceful protests. One person talked about witnessing and mothering. And I think this is so important because I define witnessing as the act of personally seeing, experiencing, or being present for an event. Personal observation, publicly affirming something. And if you will recall, if you look at Bahá'í prayers and writings, how many times will you see the word witness? Even in our noonday prayer, I bear witness, oh my God. And so this to me tells us the importance of witnessing. And mothering or nurturing. Now, when we talk about talk about social action, everyone can't do everything, but we can do something. And so nurturing or mothering is another thing that this person suggested, that we offer some kind of care or nurturing for a person or a group. One person talked about creating difficult conversations about race. And as you may know, these groups have spread throughout the country now, where Baha'is are coming together and inviting communities to come in to talk about difficult conversations about race. And they said, in this one particular community, they said after the murder, every Sunday we were at the Baha'i Center, and every Sunday we invited the community and people came from all around to have difficult conversations about race. Prayer and action, which was another thing that a person emphasized, that yes, pray, but then after you pray, get up and do something about what's going on. Movie night, this one group, and now it's been several years now, where they show movies about race and have conversations about racial issues. Healing Racism Support Group, and this person said, I started a Healing Racism Support Group, and at first I just invited white women. I'm a white woman, so I just figured I would talk to people who are like me. So after several months, we decided to invite women of color. And she said, then it spread there were so many people, she said, who came to this group, Healing Racism Support Group. And finally, one person talked about King Day of Service. That is taking advantage of some of the holidays, national holidays we have, like Martin Luther King Day, King Day of Service. So these were some of the things in terms of how they responded to the racial violence in their respective communities. And this is what gave me hope. When I collected those stories of racial discrimination, my heart was very heavy. But then when I got to this question, I felt very inspired. I felt uplifted. I want to, in the time that I have left, speak very briefly about the Minneapolis community. And there was a 5-part documentary called Minneapolis Playing a Humble Knight. And this documented what happened in that community. And I'm going to play just a bit of that. It's also available online, but I wanted you to hear that before I close. Would you believe? Okay.
Is it on YouTube?
It disappeared.
No.
Is it on YouTube?
What?
Is it on YouTube? Is it on YouTube?
Right.
Where's Kalena?
You know, I love technology, but I hate it.
Maybe we can quickly Google it.
Thank you. Thank you.
When in doubt, use YouTube, right?
Playing, yes. Minneapolis, playing part 1.
It's the audio.
And hit the volume on the,
It's on mute. Volume is muted.
Can you hear it?
hit
No, the
the,
volume is muted
Volume,
Okay.
on the YouTube.
on you.
Where?
right here.
Oh, yeah. Right here.
Hey everybody, this is Andy over at the Bahá'í Center in Minneapolis, a block away from the George Floyd Memorial. There's the barricade right there, this whole area, that white truck, and then the memorial's right beyond that. And then inside the Bahá'í Center, so what we've got today for needs, we have some canned food. Thank you, we got some breakfast food, a little bit of breakfast food. The real need is in the baby formula diapers. We have no diapers right now at all. So, and we have entire families coming up to us the entire day long nonstop. Yeah, I just want to give you guys an update. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.
Just one block over, 38th in Chicago is where George Floyd was killed.
So the day that George Floyd was killed, there was definitely a great sense of sadness and some disbelief that this could be happening almost on our very doorstep.
To see that man crying and grieving for his life and our mama, that's the thing that touched me the most, because it's like no one was there to protect him. No one was there.
I felt really heartbroken. And I think it's because my whole life I've seen the prejudice and the inequities. And as I've progressed through life, seeing that it continues and it's gotten worse, the systemic racism has gotten worse. That inherent oneness of humanity is still to be recognized. And so I felt really helpless at first.
I caught a text letting me know of a urgent devotional at the Bahá'í Center. It said, the Bahá'í Center is just right there. We should have something. You know, we're in the midst of the reality of COVID and everyone was home. But this calling to just come here and to be here was very strong. I think there were like 8 of us that showed up. But when we came here, there was just like a flood of humanity just like passing by, heading to the corner. There was a lot of traffic and a lot of marching already and a lot of chants already. And it was beautiful to see the response.
Unrest erupted throughout much of the city and lasted for 3 nights. Entire business districts burned down.
You know, we couldn't even tell what was truth. There was so much misinformation flooding everywhere. A lot of talk of white supremacists like converging to just accelerate the damage. A lot of neighborhood groups where like all the black captains for all the neighborhoods came to these parks and had a quick kind of training rundown of how each block and how each neighborhood can kind of take on like a watch.
And so this idea of safety and pulling together as a community, it came to the forefront of everyone's mind in the neighborhood. And so the neighbors started talking to each other more, just like the House of Justice has been asking us to do, is to get to know your neighborhood. The context of what happened with George Floyd forced that within our neighborhood.
Residents of Minneapolis reemerged to a new reality. Many loaded up their cars with shovels, brooms, and groceries and headed to affected areas. You are seizing opportunities, whether those thrust upon you by current circumstances or those derived from your systemic labors in the wider society, to play your part, however humble, in the effort to remedy the ills of your nation. Written by the Universal House of Justice, the Global Governing Council of the Baha'i Faith, in a letter to the United States, dated July 22nd, 2020.
I have 2 more things to say, and then I'll be done. And I want to get out of there. So I want to go back to my title, and that is Oral History as a Catalyst for Change. Thank you. And I'm going to, just the last few things I want to say. My argument is oral history can be a catalyst or an instrument for change. It amplifies silence or marginalized voices. It builds community power and solidarity. It reshapes narratives, policies, and relationships. It preserves actionable knowledge. I leave you with these 2 quotes. Some men and women glory in their exalted thoughts, but if these thoughts never reach the plane of action, they remain useless. The power of thought is dependent on manifestation in deeds, Abdul Baha, and again from Abdul Baha. But Baha'is must not be thus. They must rise above this condition. Actions must be more to them than words. By their actions, they must be merciful, and not merely by their words. They must, on all occasions, confirm by their actions what they proclaim in words. Their deeds must prove their fidelity, and their actions must show forth divine light. Thank you.
Wow, I'm so grateful to these two presenters for what they have brought to us today. I wonder if there are